Should Florida State make the college football playoff? And will they?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for tuning in once again. Please rate and review, like and subscribe, and share this podcast wherever you can. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for your first purchase. Terms apply. Today's show is going to discuss the likelihood of Florida State reaching the college football playoff. It's an opportunity that I think is very realistic after breaking it down, looking at everything, not only for Florida State, but we're going to go through several other teams this year, Florida State's schedule, to figure it out. So let's get started. Number one, do they have the talent overall? I've been breaking down some of that, talking about the secondary, how good it is, might be the nation's best. Quarterback play, at least going to have a fifth-year senior. Offensive line will be one of the most experienced in the nation. Running backs are loaded. Tight end room's probably a little underrated. Linebacker room may need a little help. D-line's much better than it has been with some of the depth they brought in, Marvin Jones, etc. Receivers a bit inexperienced, but you got Malik that's coming over from Bama. You've got Hakeem coming up the ranks, and you got guys like Ja'Kai Douglas still coming around too. Several other upperclassmen have a shot. Overall, the only thing that I'm worried about beyond those things is whether or not linebacker depth is going to hold out. That's one of those things it's a guess. But overall beyond that, it's a really good roster with depth. They've hit the home run with the portal again this year, and they found out a little bit more about some of those freshmen and sophomores in spring ball. So they seem to be in a good spot. So I'm not worried about that. What I want to discuss is basically their schedule and where Florida State stands. Here's the in order, because whether or not it's talent or not is one thing. Having the right schedule is quite another. And sometimes schedules just don't work out. We'll talk about Florida and some other schools here in a little bit. But in order, August 24th in Dublin, Ireland, they play Georgia Tech. That's obviously a unique place to play an opening game. It's first game in college football this year. That's a pretty interesting game. Second game, Boston College. Obviously, here's the deal. That is not a team that Florida State expected to struggle with last year. I doubt they're going to take them lightly, and it is also a Monday game, so you get a couple extra days to prepare. The next week, they're off on the Saturday, and then they come back at home against Memphis. Seth Hennigan's a really good quarterback. I'll talk about him in a minute, but that should be a win. They got Cal at home. They're not very good. The first road test, true road test, is SMU. They've got a good quarterback. I don't know if it's going to be enough to get over the top. I'm not sure they got the linemen to handle Florida State up front, but I think SMU will hang around for a while, at least through 2.5 to 3 quarters, and make it a game. Clemson is the week after that on October 5th. Look, there's no doubt about it. Clemson's a very good program. They've given Florida State a lot of problems, but they did break through in Death Valley last year to beat the Tigers. A Friday night game coming up in 13 days after that, so they get a week off, and then they play a Friday game at Duke. Fair enough. A week or so after that, 8 days, they go to Miami. This is where it gets interesting. Always tough to play at Miami. It's your arch rival, etc. We'll see. North Carolina shouldn't be as good, and they've quite honestly not achieved. And they had Drake May. They didn't achieve what they should, and they had him. They lost him. Are they going to be that great? I'm not sold. Arguably the toughest game on the schedule is the week after Carolina comes to town. That's a trip to South Bend to play the Irish. Then they get 2 weeks later, they play Charleston Southern at home, and then the Gators come to town. Will Billy Napier still be the head coach? We'll talk about that in a minute. Here's how I rank the games from easiest to hardest. This is just mine. Charleston Southern at 12, Cal at 11, BC 10. Duke, the road game, is 9th. North Carolina 8th at home. Florida 7th. Memphis 6th. Georgia Tech 5th. SMU is going to be 4th. I've got Clemson 3rd, Miami 2nd, Notre Dame 1. Now, somebody's immediately going to say, Florida 7th. It's because I don't think Billy will be there at the end of the year, and I think a lot of the players will have mailed it in. If that game was in the first 5 games of the schedule, it'd be different. I think by the end of the season, Billy Napier is going to be in a lot of trouble, and a lot of players are going to be more concerned about where they're going to be playing next year as opposed to playing the Florida State Seminoles. Prove me wrong. Here are a couple other interesting stats about this game that make it kind of seem like a normal schedule to a certain degree, but there is a little caveat to it. They only have 4 true road tests because of the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech obviously is the neutral. From the 18 programs in recent history, say 1980 onward, there's about 18 schools that can win a national title. They play 4 of them. Now, there's a caveat, good and bad there. Florida is obviously down. That's one of them. Miami, Ward only knows. That's kind of a weird team. Clemson is going to be looking for revenge, and they're certainly a recent team that's been good. But do they have the depth? Where are they going to be in that game? We'll see. And then the game at Notre Dame. Those 4 teams are the more tradition-rich programs. The only other one, again, Preston Stone's the quarterback at SMU. We'll see. And then Seth Hennigan, that game with Memphis. We'll talk about him in a moment. Those are some pretty interesting games. 6 of the 12 quarterbacks they're going against are returning starters. But the schedule in general, here's the interesting caveat. They're not elite programs, but they're teams that can jump up and bite you if you're not careful. The Noles don't play NC State, Louisville, Virginia Tech, or Virginia. Now, why would I mention Virginia? There's both edges of this. I think that's a team they should stomp, but you don't play them. You don't play Wake Forest either. So there's some teams like that aren't on the schedule, but NC State's tough. Louisville's got a really good coach. Tech's got a good quarterback. They're kind of rising up a little bit. Any of those games could give you some issues. Florida State does not play them. I did want to give an example of why you have to be careful with your schedule and some of these guys that you're going against. Like the Memphis game, they should win. But if you have turnovers in any major game, any kind of blunder, punt block, something like that, and you give an opponent that nobody thinks is going to win, you give them a little hope, things can go wrong. Here's what Seth Hennigan did last year, his junior season, as a quarterback for the Memphis Tigers. Completed 318 of 476 passes, 66.8%, 3,883 yards, 32 touchdowns, 9 picks, 8.2 yards per completion. He will hit a lot of short passes, screens, checkdowns. He's not foolish with the football. He's consistent. Now, Florida State's secondary, again, is very good. And I don't think if it's an even game turnover-wise and there's no really weird plays where point blank Memphis just gets an easy road for a touchdown, that's going to be hard for them to win. But this is an example. I could have used Preston Stone's stats as well at SMU. These are the kind of games you have to be careful. The more I look into these things, the more I read magazines, the more I read articles, and I kind of do these updates about the schedule, the more I realize this is going to be a very big quarterback year. Again, 6 of the 12 are returning starters, and Stone and Hennigan are a couple of them. But you have to bring your A game in those opportunities or else you're going to be in trouble. So that's something that Florida State has to be wary of. Also, if you kind of look at the road games and some of the teams that you're going against, none of them are necessarily great, except for the 2 arguably most difficult games on the slate, and that's Miami and Notre Dame. They both have dynamic quarterbacks that can move. That's something that's interesting as well. Here's a little something with Hennigan, a guy that's not as dynamic as Riley Leonard at Notre Dame, but against Missouri last year, he had 9 carries for 21 yards, just enough. Boise State, 13 carries for 64 yards, 6 carries for 27 yards, and a win in the bowl game against Iowa State. These quarterbacks, if you get out of the rush lanes, it's something Florida State did a little bit too much last year sometimes. Really going for the sack. You have to stay in your rush lanes. Keep the quarterback in the pocket in today's era. 5 yards here, 7 yards there will eat you up. They get on the road and they're going against some of these quarterbacks. Riley Leonard will definitely hurt you. The quarterback at Miami, obviously very, very athletic, doesn't prefer to run, but that can be something that can hurt you. We'll see how that goes. We'll get into some of the projections here in just a second on Locked On Seminoles, but before I do, I'm just curious, in the comments, yes or no, Florida State makes the playoff, and part B, not one or the other, but part B, why? Not just because they're Florida State, don't give some generic answer. If they're going to make it, why do you think they will? I'm going to go into more detail about why I think so here next on Locked On Seminoles. If you're looking for an opportunity to get to a baseball game, or if you're trying to get to a concert or anything else, Gametime is a great opportunity. So download the Gametime app today. You can pick out anything that you want in terms of a game, like going to see the Tigers, going to play the White Sox, going to see the Braves playing somebody like the Mets, whatever it might be. There's a lot of different opportunities, and they are the Major League Baseball preferred app for the opportunity to get tickets. Gametime is a great choice for you. So last minute deals, saving 60% off. If you want to have an opportunity, again, sports, concerts, comedy, anything like that, a theater event, you can get something with Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So let's talk a little bit about ACC projections. This is from ESPN, and I think it's a nice way to kind of circumvent just one person, myself, talking about the opportunities, where they have the rankings, who Florida State plays, etc. in this league. It's pretty interesting because, again, it's a little topsy-turvy. Florida State has the highest ranking, 27.5%, Clemson at 23.8%, Miami at 11.7%, SMU at 9.7%, Louisville 6.8%, NC State 6.7%, Virginia Tech 5.8%, and North Carolina at 2%. Here's the interesting part. They play Clemson, they play Miami, they play SMU. But again, they don't play Louisville, they don't play NC State, they don't play Virginia Tech. So 3 teams in a row there you don't play. And I know that like North Carolina is a decent team. I just don't buy they're going to do much. They just lost the top 5 pick at quarterback. I'm not buying they're going to give Florida State a ton of trouble. Prove me wrong. We'll see about that. And I also think it's going to be kind of interesting how Florida State takes on being the hunted, because teams are going to be coming after them after the last couple of seasons. But I just don't think a lot of these schools are going to be able to do a ton. We'll see how that goes in just a minute. But I think there's also one other major point here. This staff has been together. So some of these road games, you can say what you want. Duke, and do they really, are they scared? Miami game, half the fans there will be Florida State fans, give or take. Be about 50-50, at worst 45-55. The Notre Dame game is the only true road test that bothers me. And then, of course, the kind of the goofiness of the Georgia Tech game. It's August 24th. It's early, and it's in Ireland. How that goes, I don't know. My prediction is that Florida State is going to go at worst 10-2, if not 11-1, and make the playoff. And a lot of it has to do with this schedule. I just think that not having Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech is a really key part of it. They're just not going to get as beat up. Even if they lost to Miami and the Notre Dame games, I don't think anybody else out there, I just don't see losing to Clemson at home. I don't think anybody else would beat them, and they would still have a great chance, if they do that, to win the league, or at least be tied with Miami or something, and then play them in the ACC title game. I'll definitely take Florida State on a neutral field if they lose to them the first time, to win the ACC and get the automatic bid. Now, to my understanding, that means you're getting one of the top 5 seeds. We'll see how that goes, but that's how I see it. I also think that Florida State will have, I would say, at least a 50% chance, if not a 60% chance, to go 11-1. It's amazing how much different I look at the schedule now compared to like 3-4 months ago, researching about other teams, because it's not only what you do, it's what other teams do. And I'm not as high on a couple of the teams as I originally was. SMU is one. So many people have talked about them, and that is their first road test in Dallas. But they're just not a team that has enough guys in the trenches, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but if you can get through the first 5-6 games, you give DJ an early opportunity to get a rhythm. He doesn't have to throw for 350 a game or anything crazy, but if he can throw for 250 to 280 a game, not turn it over with the running backs and the defense they have, they'll be in pretty good shape. So again, even if they lose one of the games against Miami or Notre Dame, or even both, they would have a great chance still to make the playoff. Most of the teams that I'll talk about, my picks to make the playoff, are probably going to lose 2 games. A lot of these conference schedules, with the conferences getting bigger, but not as many of them, it's rough. So there will only be 2 or 3 teams, I'm guessing, with 1 loss or no losses. That's my guess. We'll see. Maybe it ends up being 4 or 5, but that's college football. We're to the point now where there will be very few of them. The competition is very, very high. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Seminoles. And to that point, leave me a comment on YouTube. which team or teams do you think have the best chance to make the playoff outside of the obvious, like Georgia or Texas? Okay, I get it. Which teams do you think are on that bubble to make the playoff this year? You could be Florida State if you think they're a bubble team. Which ones are going to get seeds like 8, 9, 10, and 11? The number 12 seed end up being Memphis, is a team that's a group of 5. So 8 through 11 are the teams that we're going to be talking about. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. All right, the college football playoff. There's a lot of ways you could look at it. This is my overall conjecture on it. Take it for what it's worth. I think that the SEC will get 4 teams. The Big Ten will get 3. You're going to obviously have the opportunity to look at the game for a group of 5. So that's the 12 seed. So that you're up to 8. You've got the Big 12 will get 1. If they got 2, it'd be surprising, but it's possible. Then the ACC will get a couple. It's possible the ACC could get 3. Notre Dame is a fly in the ointment there for both the Big 12 and the ACC, but I don't really think they'll necessarily take a spot away from the Big 10 or the SEC. So here's what I got. I'm not seeding these. This is not in an order. I want to learn more about what the committee this year is looking for before I seed anything. I have no idea. Take it for what it's worth. I go with the SEC first. I got Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Bama. Big Ten, I've got Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. That's 7 teams. ACC, I've got Florida State and Clemson. And then I've got independent, I got Notre Dame. And then I went back and forth on this with the Big 12. It'll be either Utah or Oklahoma State. I don't know which it'll be. That's my pick. I could see Kansas State and a few other schools having a chance to. That league is really, really hard. Arizona's got a great offense. Maybe they could do it, but I'll go with the defensive team more often. By the way, Oklahoma State has 20 starters back, plus a guy in their lineup that was injured, or he would have started last year, that is back. So depending how you want to rank it, 21, that's insane. So Utah's a really well-coached team. They got a 7th-year quarterback. One of those 2 teams I think will make the playoff. Now, as for Florida State with this, do I think that they are a shoo-in? No. Do I think they will automatically win the league? No, but they're my pick. It'll be close. I think if they get in as an ACC champ, they'll probably be the number 3 to 5 seed, somewhere in there. That's my guess, because the Big Ten and the SEC are the most likely to be, however it ends up, being at the top of the board. But it may not, because, again, these schools could just beat the bejesus out of each other, and that ends up being a liability. That's where you get into the stuff about the committee. And that's why I didn't want to seed it. So let me explain further. How you value wins. Some guys are just, well, you went undefeated, you have to go. Some guys are like, no, it's just the total eye test. Everybody is different. Every committee will be different. There's not going to be the same thing year to year, because even if it's the same person that came back on a committee, that would be a very unique scenario where you're looking at them, you're like, did you adjust anything? Did you learn anything? It is hard to project these things. You're dealing with the human element. Humans make errors. Humans change their mind. Humans evolve. It includes the college football playoff. And the last part about this, I'm curious about the ACC. It's a little better, I think, than some people give it credit. Like, again, NC State is not a team. Like, looking at the projections, NC State is the 6th ranked team. They just got a quarterback coming in that, quite honestly, is pretty good, a transfer. I think he's a 6th-year senior, 5th or 6th-year senior that hardly ever turns the ball over. They got a great defense. They got one of the best receivers in college football, and Noah Rogers, also transferred from Ohio State. They could be a team that surprises a bunch of people. Who knows? Maybe Florida State plays them in the ACC title game and they beat them, and that gives them an extra bump. There's so many little factors like that. How does the committee evaluate it? Every single person could look at that differently. I don't know. We don't know that much yet. I'm curious to hear what they have to say. Of course, that's like it's right around Halloween when they will do the playoff stuff, and it's fascinating to me. But it's not an easy thing to really go through, because honestly, there's a lot of pressure on those people. This is the first year for the playoff. So will they play it more conservatively and just go with record? Will they do a little bit more concern about, except for a couple of teams, and kind of give them some grace? because like Texas, they host, I believe, Georgia. They go to Michigan. They're going to play A&M at the end of the year on the road. Would they think about letting Texas in at 9-3 if they lost to 3 really good teams? Maybe. Penn State is a school that they haven't got in the playoff yet, but they're also a school, to be realistic, it's been on the cusp a couple times. Would they give them a little nod? Florida State, they didn't get in last year, and they were right there on that cusp. Maybe they get the nod. The human element. It's so wild with the playoff. It's hard to say how that will go. So anyway, again, my playoff teams: Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State. And then again, there'll be a group of 5 school. So anyway, please like this video and hit that subscribe, rate, and review. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again next week. This has been Brian Smith on Locked On Seminoles. Have a great weekend.